Hi pals, it's me, Artie, they them pronouns only, and I'm in my best manic pixie dream fit for someone who doesn't go outside because today I wanted to talk about depiction of BPD in media. Mainly, I wanted to focus on the depiction that I saw recently in Casualty. There was a character who was in 2 episodes that I felt like was probably one of the best modern depictions of BPD that I've seen in media in recent years. Whilst it wasn't an easy watch and she wasn't the perfect victim because nobody is, I think it was relatively carefully done and did have a really big focus on the impact of the lack of resources that the NHS is getting and how that directly impacts, anyone with mental illness, but also quite specifically BPD. Obviously there are some significant trigger warnings throughout this video, so I'll do my best to list some, but I'll probably miss some out, so do proceed with caution. Some of the ones I've listed are victim blaming, abuse, murder, stigmatising mental illness, medical neglect, prejudice, suicide attempts and suicide, brief depictions of graphic bodily harm. So I will try not to go into too much detail for each of these, but there will be some brief mentions of some really rough shit, to be honest. I watch a lot of crime dramas and medical dramas, so people, usually women with BPD, come up semi-regularly, and it's really never for a good reason. As you can imagine, the crime dramas in particular depict people with BPD as mainly one of 2 things. One of them is murderers or abusers, or victims that deserved what they got. A lot of the portrayals are not particularly sensitive or understanding. They are usually quite stigmatized. A few recent shows I've seen have been depicting women with BPD as suspects for somebody's murder. I think that was The 12. It's an Australian show from like the jury's perspective mainly. She is suspected of murdering somebody at one point. They have numerous suspects, but like she's one of the suspects, and her BPD diagnosis is used as a reason to doubt her innocence. In the end, spoilers, in the end she didn't murder that person, but she did help cover it up with some other people, which isn't great either. Or the other version that I have seen is a victim of murder where I don't think she even had BPD. A lot of court cases bring in psychologists to either do assessments on the people if they're still alive, or to do assessments based on collective anecdotal evidence. So in this case, the victim was murdered, and they were assuming that she probably had a personality disorder, and they were leaning more towards BPD specifically, although as well NPD, I always get the letters wrong, but whatever the one that people always call like narcissist, that is quite a common one as well that comes up in crime dramas in particular. So they were using this possible diagnosis as a good reasoning for why someone would murder her. This was also a social experiment. I think this was done in America as well as the UK, but we watched the UK version. I think it was just called The Jury or something like that, where they had 2 separate juries who didn't know that they were there listen to a whole case that had already happened, was a real case, to see whether they would come up with the same decision at the end. And for the most part, it was entirely based on who was in the jury and how persuasive and bulldozery they could be to get the others to vote their way. Unfortunately, in the real case, I mean, obviously, watching it was really frustrating for me anyway. I feel like there was a lot of things missing from the victim's side of things. It's like they didn't really even try to get enough evidence to try and argue that she was murdered on purpose, not manslaughter, because the murderer had like 20 something character witnesses, 90% positive, and I think she had two who were her murderer and her friend who said that she was concerned for her mental health. Oh no, and an ex-partner of hers who said that she was abusive. It wasn't easy to tell because I just feel like they were lacking a lot of information on her part, and apparently like her family weren't really allowed or invited to be involved in that case when it actually happened, so they weren't able to provide their own statements. Yeah, I don't think I would have been able to make a decision based on how little evidence they had on her behalf. But yeah, the real case ended with the defendant got off with manslaughter, so he had a much shorter sentence, but he did murder her by hitting her over the head with a hammer 4 times after strangling her into kind of like a day's submission. Not really sure how that could be manslaughter in any regard. Maybe not planned murder, but yeah. So, and then when it comes to other media, there's obviously different aspects to that as well. The main one you see is the manic pixie dream girl, because again, it's usually women depicted as having BPD. I have a quote from an article, I'll also link that in the description. The manic pixie dream girl tends to be someone with some form of trauma in their life, such as the death of a close family member or personal trauma that is vaguely mentioned but rarely explored in depth. They usually have colourful hair and whimsical philosophies about life, death, or their purpose in life. The defining characteristic of the manic pixie dream girl is that she's not like other girls, meaning she tends to read books and listen to indie or older bands. Some obvious examples are, if I can't remember their names, I'll definitely put some photos of like those characters, but 500 Days of Summer, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Ramona Flowers is a pretty iconic manic pixie dream girl, and autistic. Like obviously in particular that's a well-defined media trope. Not great, but at least they're not a murderer or abusive. And I mean, obviously some of the older things like Girl Interrupted. Yes, I did watch that film and read the book. How did you know? Looking for Alaska. Honestly, most of the girls that John Green writes. Because I mean, I didn't read Paper Towns, but I watched the film, and I would say that Cara Delevingne's depiction of that character is manic pixie dream girl, and it does just kind of go on, and I think that's where a lot of this like weird neurodivergent main characters by accident thing merges together, that like a lot of these manic pixie dream girls are just kind of like ADHD and or autistic accidental characters with trauma. A lot of their appeal is that whole like,
oh my goodness, she sees the world so differently, and she's so like weird, but she's sexy, so it's fine to be weird because she's sexy, and I want to fuck her, so it's fine that she's weird, it's actually desirable.
Whereas when you're not the attractive sexy manic pixie dream girl, you're just insane and need to be locked up and deserve everything bad that you get in your life. So, you know, the usual vibes of any women in media. And then obviously I, like I said, watch a lot of medical dramas. I can't actually remember a lot of depictions over the different shows I've watched, both American and UK, so I don't really have anything to draw on from those, but I wanted to speak about Casualty's specifically because of the more nuanced factors in the depiction. Generally, Casualty as a medical drama it's kind of similar in some ways to Grey's Anatomy, that the writers take things that have been happening in the news of the country and use that with some of their plot lines. So they often reflect real things, real struggles that are happening and have been reported in the news. This plotline might have been in the news, but it's not something I've necessarily seen anything about. However, I have seen enough news articles about people on NHS waiting lists and social care waiting lists and benefits waiting lists and such forth because of it. So any number of them could have also been people with BPD, as an example. But even if this in particular hasn't been in the news, it has probably happened to a lot of people. So trying to remember what happened, because obviously, again, a lot of long-running dramas have more than one plotline in each episode. So this is just like 1/3 or 1/4 of like 2 episodes. We start off with this young woman, not really sure how old she is. She could be about my age, she could be a bit younger. She does have dyed red hair though. So you know she's unwell in the brain. She is brought in because of a suicide attempt. She swallowed a bunch of pills, and I think at that point she was in by herself. I think she might have self-declared, and she didn't want anyone to ring her sister at first, but she was being attended by Rash, who is one of the regularly occurring main cast. I think he's an F1, I don't know what they are either, but like he's like, you know, one of the regular doctors, and he really wants to help. So he does keep her in because he really wants her to see the psych team or whatever. Like they have a couple of different like mental health teams that they call. I don't know whether it's necessarily this like hospital psych department or like a separate entity. And like Casualty, for anyone who might not know, I didn't really think about this, but like Casualty is set in A&E. And I think one of the biggest criticisms of this storyline was just partly that A&E is not where you should be sending people who are in a mental health crisis. They are not equipped. They are maybe equipped to deal with some physical harm or injuries, which she did end up in A&E with, but like generally besides that, there's nothing else that they can do. They had her drink some activated charcoal, which made her vomit. I didn't think that's how that worked, because that's not something that I think has been necessarily very clear to me anyway. I thought that you just take it and it basically stops the absorption of those medications. Not that it makes you fucking puke, so that was lovely. And they wanted to keep her in so that she could see whichever psych team it was that they were referring to. He was very kind. He also then ended up sitting with her outside of his work hours for a while because I think her sister couldn't make it right away, which is a little bit of a shaky ground, babes. One of the issues from my own experience of having BPD is that, particularly when you're like not within sort of the recovery sphere yet, there is a lot of issues with boundaries. You don't understand them basically because you've probably never been taught boundaries, or the kind of boundaries you've been taught are just kind of ways people can walk all over yours and just tell you what to do, along with attachment issues, including becoming really attached to inappropriate people. So like this is where healthcare professionals do need to be careful with that sort of thing, but also same with like, I don't know, teachers, university lecturers, you know, anybody in some kind of like caring role or like a role like with a difference in power balances, because it's probably not going to look good, my guy. And when it doesn't go well, because it probably won't go well, you are not equipped to manage that. So like, what in some ways I'm like, wow, Imagine that. I don't agree with that choice that he made. I do think he should have gone home and not sat with her outside of his working hours. He did eventually go home, but when he came back in for his next shift, she had been moved from her cubicle out into a corridor where all of the noise was becoming quite distressing to her. Another part of this plot for Rash as well was that there were countless things in A&E that were just not fucking working. He had just returned from definitely at least a month, but maybe a bit longer, off of work from his dad passing away, and he made a reference to like one of the lights was still flickering from before he went on leave. Like, how has that not been sorted? Along with a lot of other things, there were staff being electrocuted, patients being electrocuted, trying to use just the plug sockets. The other local hospital, I think they call it St. John's, had a fucking fire. So they had to take in all of those patients, and they think it was likely because of faulty electrics, similar to what they were experiencing themselves. So yeah, like, he was really frustrated with the lack of like urgency in fixing some of these things, which could kill somebody, injure somebody, or affect the ability of them to actually be able to care for people. Also, the amount of times that staff came out with pieces of equipment that just didn't fucking work because they hadn't been taken away or marked with, like, I don't know, like a label or something saying that they didn't work, which wasted time. So yeah, she was in the hallway, but he had to go and deal with another patient, and then due to this flickering light, someone did go around to start working on it, but instead of just working on it right away, they just left the light bulb there unattended, and this was right next to where the patient was in the hallway. And so she ate the light bulb. Yeah, so then they had to deal with that on top of everything else. Rash also couldn't complete that. He had to have somebody else finish off making sure that she didn't have loads of glass in her face still. And he addressed this with the person in charge, who is new, who is Patrick. Goodbye. Put him in the bin. I hate this man. Patrick is much more concerned with how you speak to him rather than what you're speaking to him about. And he is much more concerned with like,
oh, I'm on your side. You're shouting at the wrong person.
It's like, my guy, this is literally your fucking job. You're the one that takes these problems to the people above you. So Rash was like, found out that the mental health team had still not seen this woman yet. And it'd been over, like, either nearly or over 24 hours since she was first admitted, or since he even requested for that. So he did chase a few times. Eventually someone did come down, but that's when he was off again. Yeah, he was no longer on shift, so he wasn't there. But he had been told that, yeah, she would be seen by the mental health team and she'd be put back into a cubicle, which never happened because of the influx from the fire at the other hospital. Apparently the mental health team did see her, but that was when Rash was not there. He was at home, probably sleeping. And Patrick was the one who dealt with it, and she had just been discharged. She ate a light bulb and they discharged her. They were like,
yeah, you'll like self-present, right? You'll just go voluntarily commit yourself, yeah?
and she was like, yeah, of course I will, because that's a big part of fucking BPD. You can go from being and looking extremely distressed to looking and seeming extremely functional and completely fine. And they just let her go. They just let her go. So Rash was really pissed at that. And he said that he should have at least been consulted. Patrick was just being a dick. And then the patient is back with another suicide attempt where her wrists. Actually, no, I don't think she was admitted with another suicide attempt that time. That with this one, she was admitted because she had jabbed a pen into her arm. and it was just sticking out of her arm. So they had to get that removed. Her sister was in complete distress breakdown mode. Her sister loves her. She just wants her to get better, wants to help her, support her. But again, another BPD thing is you can't really see it or understand it, or you just don't believe it. You feel like you are just a burden, so actually it's better off for you than it is to stick around and try to get better, because all you're doing is causing more problems for people who wouldn't have these problems if you weren't there. None of this is true. Anyone who's just heard me, people care, they're not making it up, and even if you are burdensome and annoying, it's okay to be. We can all be burdensome and annoying. That is not a moral failing. And then I think they were going to have to discharge her again, because every time Rash spoke to the mental health team and spoke to the patient, and she said, yeah, I don't qualify for the right, like, this kind of care, because they don't see BPD as a means for, I can't remember what exactly it was, but I'm assuming that they basically wanted to section her, which is its own minefield of problems that I don't have personal experience of, so like I will not discuss that. But like, this is the kind of help that they were hoping to access for her. I think she'd been in numerous programs and it wasn't helping her. She was being incredibly mean and horrible to her sister, trying to push her sister away, to make her go away so that she could be alone. So, and she said like, oh, she would have stuck around here all day otherwise. I just wanted to go and get on with her day. She also didn't want to be around Rash anymore, because she felt like that he was just pretending to care. And I mean, from her point of view, it probably does look like that, because when he was around her, he was acting like he cared and made her these promises, but all of those promises just didn't happen, and he wasn't around when those things were going on. And it's like their lack of transparency with a lot of NHS care is what often leads to patients feeling that way about particular doctors, because she didn't know that he was trying to do all these things, but every time those things finally actually were going to happen, he wasn't on shift, and it was the person above him making all the decisions. So yeah, she told him to go away, and she was being treated by Rita, who's a nurse, and I don't know, like, I don't know if there was a doctor involved in half of that stuff, but yeah, so Rita was then also involved in looking after her, and trying to get her help, and was saying the same things as Rash of like, you know, like, we can do something, like I can speak to people, I'll do everything I possibly can for you. And she's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, she'd like said to Rash that, you know, at least that other doctor is not even pretending to care. I know where I stand with him, but with you, like, you're just pretending, so like just do us all a favour and just go away. Which is kind of what I meant earlier with the whole, like, especially with him sitting with her outside of his work shift times, definitely goes outside of your professional work boundaries, gives a certain idea, a certain sense of safety and care, and then when all those things fall through, it's like it's an even bigger letdown than if she was just being treated by the higher up Dr. Patrick, who was just always an arsehole and clearly didn't actually give a shit and was just there to do the bare minimum of his job and then fuck off. And yeah, I just think it was sad because she didn't get to hear that actually he was really trying, and he had all these things lined up, but it was the person above him who got in the way of that. Rita basically experienced a similar thing of like everything that she tried to do wouldn't work because of her diagnosis not meeting the right criteria for the right care that she actually needed. Yeah, they got the pen removed. She managed to go to the bathroom, even though she was like under watch from members of staff who were in the cubicle all the time to keep an eye on her. They still let her go to the toilet by herself, where she killed herself. I'm not really sure exactly how she did it, but there was a lot of blood. Rita is the one that found her because I think she went to go check on her and was talking, or like was bringing her sister to the right bay. So Rita and the patient's sister were the ones who found her in like the disabled bathroom floor. It was Rash and Rita in the resus. She died on the table in recess. Her sister was there the whole time as well and was distraught, obviously. And the sister lashed out at Rash at some point, like, you know, she was in your care, you promised me that you would do everything you could, which is a kind of like a reflection of what he said to Rita when his dad died, because Rita was caring for him basically outside of her nurse shifts, and he blamed her for him getting out of the house and getting hit by a car. And both Rash and Rita were just so drained and angry about that whole experience, because she would be alive if she had not been discharged, and she was only discharged because of quite surface level reasons, that because she wasn't actively dying at that point in time and there weren't any beds on the right ward, she was just kind of sent home when they needed beds for other people, and they didn't have enough staff to check on her, because they didn't have enough members of staff actually keeping their eyes on her to make sure she didn't actively do other things to hurt herself. That's how she ended up hurting herself more often. Yeah, I can't really say much else on that, but like, I do think the depiction of it was done well. Her moods changed very quickly between being pleasant or passive to being angry, aggressive, shouting, crying, going between like negative self-talk of being awful and useless and just a burden, to just being angry at everybody else around her. The kind of splitting she would have on people, particularly her sister, but also Rash. She also would talk about, like, it was kind of a mixture of she felt too many things, or sometimes she felt nothing, that she had to do something about it, which led to the self-harming behaviour and suicidal attempts. And she's like, I know my sister loves me so much, but I don't know why, and I just want her to be happy and be able to live her life and not have to think about or worry about me. A lot of this sort of like, I waste a lot of her time, she wastes so much energy on me, I want to be better, I do, but I just can't. And as well as like some of the extreme behaviours that can happen from that, it's not as typical self-harm as what immediately comes to like most people's minds in the mainstream. There are lots of different ways you can harm yourself, from small to really, really risky big actions, and as well like so out of like the mainstream's thoughts process of like what is deemed dangerous, to the point that they, you know, the maintenance person left a light bulb near her because, one, he didn't know who she was just some patient in the corridor. They don't know that she's a self-harm or suicide risk. He's not a doctor, she's just in the corridor, she's not in the right kind of ward, she's not in a cubicle. But also the fact of like, they don't think people are going to do that. And the same with like her getting a hold of the pen and doing that to herself as well. You know, people think sharp objects and medications are like the main things, but no, like literally anything could be a risk to somebody. I know it's supposed to be quite in the UK I think things are changing, but you used to often be picked up by police and just kept in a cell if you were a risk to yourself or others. I don't agree with that, but like that's what might still be happening. And they would do things like taking your shoelaces, like they would take everything possible to prevent you from harming yourself or being able to attempt suicide. There were definitely some issues around like peak lockdown pandemic times, that masks were also a threat, unfortunately. You just don't know. I mean, like, honestly, all you need is a wall for some people. Like, you just do not think of those things until you are that person or you know that person. So I think they highlighted the spectrum of some of the BPD experience quite well. It was nice to see that there were doctors and nurses who wanted to help and weren't treating her like shit because of it. That's a little bit fantasy. But you know, this plot is dark enough. I actually quite like the little bit of fantasy sprinkled in there of, you know, medical professionals giving a shit. Because then that also helped highlight the fact that even if or when medical professionals do care and do try everything they can to get support for mentally ill people in general who end up in A&E, but also specifically people with BPD, because the BPD prevented her from accessing care. If she had a different diagnosis, I think it was like BPD is not seen as an acute risk or something, like an acute crisis or some shit, and it's like, that's basically all BPD is repeated acute crises. But yeah, like, because these doctors and nurses did care and were trying to get the support she should be able to get, it then highlighted how ridiculous it was. The hoops to jump through, how different doctors will step in and just do something different to what you wanted them to do. The limitations of the staff who do care. Ironically, some things that I did talk about in my research thing, that, you know, even if they want to do right by the patients, the system just prevents them from doing so. Like in this instance, the person above both of them just kept fucking releasing her. They just kept letting her go and kept telling them off for them being honest about how pissed off they are with this awful man's decisions. The fact that even the mental health crisis team was just sort of like, oh, but you're all right though, love. You'll go and like you'll present yourself to this place, right? You'll go and find the help that you need. We don't need to put you under whatever. And just let her go. Like, clearly they don't understand BPD, and they're the mental health like crisis team. I can give a bit of leeway and slack to the A&E people, because they're not really supposed to be the ones dealing with mental health crises. They're the ones who deal with the stuff that you do to yourself because of the mental health crises physically. And then the fact that they wouldn't even let her self-refer to certain services because of the BPD. In case you didn't know, health in mind, at least in my area, do not take on people with BPD, regardless of whether you are in recovery, regardless of whether you're even trying to access mental health support for BPD or not. They do not want to take you on. I had some of the most disgusting things said to me on the phone when I was seeking support back in 2020. I think 2020, maybe 2019, where I was literally just looking for some talking therapy to process some shit that I was dealing with, i.e. my physical health going to absolute shite. And I had to repeatedly explain to them that I was not looking for specific BPD help. I was looking for just some talking therapy to process what I was dealing with. I can't even remember exactly what it was that they said, but they said something like,
oh, okay, like, actually, you've really changed my mind about people with BPD, like,
I don't know, it was given that you're not like other girls. Because for the most part they think you should be getting secondary care or whatever, primary care, secondary, I don't know. Basically, it doesn't really exist in most places. You've got to get really fucking lucky. I'm only on the course that I'm on because I literally found out by accident that this service exists in my area. And then as well, like, I feel like it was a good way of highlighting that actually you're wasting more resources by discharging those patients, because they're probably going to come back in a worse state. You're wasting more resources by not taking care of them properly, because, you know, leaving her in the corridor led to needing more medical care. An untrained member of staff keeping an eye on her led to a suicide attempt that was successful in their own bathroom. on the premises of the hospital, literally in A&E, because they don't know that really they need to follow her into the bathroom, to be honest. But they also might not even legally be allowed to do that. And the multiple returns and the escalating physical care that she required. I think as well the ways that both Rita and Rash reacted to the whole situation was also like very humanizing to that patient with BPD, because, you know, they were like, this is just like a woman who needed help and who wanted help, but every time we tried to give her help or try to set her up to get help, she was denied it every single turn, or she was turned away, or someone else changed their mind and we failed her. Like, that was the narrative, is that they failed her. They could have done better and should have done better, but they fucking didn't. The fact that a lot of things can happen in like the 12 hours off or whatever it is between shifts is wild, and that they couldn't really do anything about it because, again, the system in place is shit. A lot of the higher up members of staff who have more power and control can do whatever the fuck they want and tell you to piss off. So yeah, whilst her story was awful and shit, and like I said, I'm sure something similar has happened to many people. I mean, my own experience of being in A&E from a suicide attempt was basically just a condescending talking to from the psych person and then being sent home at 4 a.m. That was like over a decade ago though, but like, I don't think it's improved, babe. I think it's worse. So like, yeah, I'm glad that it was done. I'm glad it was done in the way it was created. I do just wish that we had more like longer term or longer narratives about BPD and other kind of stigmatized mental illnesses that humanizes the people more. They don't even necessarily always have to be a happy ending, but like something a little bit more humanizing generally. This story in particular was more impactful because she didn't survive. Unfortunately, that's kind of the vibe, is that a lot of media is more impactful when the protagonist doesn't make it, particularly of marginalised groups and stigmatised health conditions. And I don't really know of many media representations of like explicitly of BPD where it's named, it's canon. I know people have told me about is it Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Wasn't sure I wanted to watch that, but besides that I can't think of anything else. And got interrupted obviously, but that's pretty odd. That was like literally based in the 70s, a real life person's experience of being diagnosed with that in the 70s. So something more up to date would be good, thank you. So yeah, like if you know of anything else, good or bad, let me know in the comments. Let me know if it's good or bad as well, because I think I need to prepare myself before going into that. But I would like to see more. I would like to talk about this a bit more from my own personal experience, but also experience of knowing a lot of other people with BPD through my life and the different ways that can present and the different struggles that can have. But yeah, I do highly recommend watching those. It was the last couple of episodes, so yeah, within the last like month or so, I think, roughly. But yeah, I recommend giving it a watch if you can deal with the things that I've mentioned, because yeah, it's not an easy watch, but I do think it's probably one of the better modern depictions I've seen that at least helps remove some stigma and humanises the person with BPD in the narrative. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share my videos. It helps support my channel. Yeah, I hope you like this video. I just yeah, really felt something when I watched those 2 episodes that I knew I wanted to talk about it. So here you are. And yeah, I will see you next week. Bye.